Hello, good evening. Welcome to CrimeCon's Book Club. I'm Nancy Baughen, the event director for CrimeCon UK, partnered by True Crime, and I'm delighted this evening that we will be diving in to a very interesting book with the author themselves, Jeremy Craddock. So, for those of you new to Instagram Live or those of you that are watching on Catch Up, this is the part of my intro where we allow time for people to see that we're live, join, and I'll also get Lisa Howells from Crime Monthly magazine to join me, who will co-host this session with Jeremy. So it's wonderful to see so many of you joining. Let's find Lisa. Please be patient. So please pop in the comments, any of you that have already read the book, have listened to the book, are halfway through. Hello, Lisa.
Hello.
Hello. Happy to see you. How are you?
I'm all right. I was having a lot of technical issues and I started to, I'm out of breath because I was running up and downstairs looking for things, but I'm here. I'm here. It's all good.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Lisa, it's really nice to see you. We've ploughed through another year of book club, and can you believe it's December?
Oh my God. And I forget how stressful December is as well. I don't know if you're feeling this, but I forget how stressful it is. So this is actually quite nice to just know we have to take an hour now and just chill out and just talk about a really good book.
A really good book. So I can see that Jeremy's already joined us, Lisa, and it's lovely to see everyone joining this evening. So hello, as always, please pop in the comments if you've read the book, what stage you're at. It is completely your book club, so please ask away questions and I'll be sure to feed them in. I've had some via email already, so we've got lots to be talking to Jeremy about. So before we get Jeremy on, let's remind everyone what we were reading. We've been reading, Lisa.
Lady in the Lake, a reporter's memoir of a murder by Jeremy Craddock. So Jeremy is a journalist, or was a journalist, and it was very much local newspapers. I mean, we'll talk about this, but it was like 1997, wasn't it? At a time, I mean, I'm a journalist and I've worked in weeklies all my career, but that's weekly magazines, and he's on a weekly paper, which I find really amusing. Like, I don't know how it feels like so old, God bless them. But back in 1997, a discovery is made in this body of water, and a body is pulled out of Coniston water, it's called.
Yeah.
And that kickstarts, and again, we'll get to this with Jeremy, but a good 20 odd years, if not more.
It didn't conclude until 2020. So that she went missing, Carol, in 1976.
Yeah.
The body gets discovered in 1997, and then 2020 we're concluding. So it spanned like 5 decades. It's quite an incredible case.
And Jeremy
was
involved, wasn't he, from 97? So we'll talk about
right the way through. Right the way through. So I'm just getting him to join because, as you can see, Jeremy, Lisa and I are very invested in this book. So if no one else is asking any questions, we'll have your undivided.
But let's get him on. To ask questions.
We certainly do.
My cats are fighting down there, so if you hear anything, just ignore them.
So Jeremy will be coming live. So for those of you on catch up, thank you for your patience. Hello, Jeremy.
Hi, Nancy. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, Jeremy.
Nice to meet you.
It's lovely. It's lovely to see you, Jeremy. It really, really is. So Lisa and I have both thoroughly enjoyed reading this book. But before we dive into the book, I really want to just do a recap of who you are, Jeremy, because you've worked in journalism for a very long time, haven't you? And you've moved from journalism, now you're an author, now you're a lecturer. So why don't we dive into you and your history, please?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I suppose in journalistic terms, I am a dinosaur, really. I began in 1992. That was when I was a trainee reporter on a local weekly newspaper in the Lake District. I missed typewriters by 1 year, which I was a little bit gutted about, actually, because I always fancied working on typewriters. But yeah, we just got the very early Apple Macs when I started. But yeah, pre-internet, pre-email. Local weekly newspaper, And at the time, I suppose it was newspapers, it was radio, it was TV, and that was about it, really. You know, so started at the Westmoreland Gazette, which was the paper where I grew up in Kendal in the Lake District, and I did quite a few years at the Gazette, and then I sort of worked across the northwest of England for various newspaper groups. And then my last job in newspapers was in 2015, and I was production editor of a dozen papers for NewsQuest in Cheshire, Merseyside, and Greater Manchester. And then I started teaching journalism at Manchester Met University. So yeah, suddenly things were brought up to date. Then I had to start teaching multimedia journalism and all the new, inventions that have come along since I started as a journalist.
So this isn't your first book, is it? The Jigsaw Murders were your first book, and I recall you joined us when we launched CrimeCon back in September 2021 with that book. And now this is your second.
It is, yeah. Yeah. So the Jigsaw Murders was a historic true crime case from Lancashire from the 1930s. And it was a case that I knew about really from when I was growing up in the Lake District and Lancaster, where it happened. My dad used to point out the house in Lancaster where this double murder had taken place. And when I was thinking about writing my first book, I remembered this case, and hadn't really been a very detailed account of the Jigsaw Murders, not one book. And I just thought it was one that could be done really well in great detail. It was a very significant case. It broke a lot of new ground for forensic science, and it's still sort of taught, to people studying forensic science. So it was quite a significant case, really. And after that one, I sort of turned my mind to, what's the next idea? And obviously, I'd always thought about the Lady in the Lake case because of my involvement in it. And I thought it'd be worth revisiting it and seeing actually how it had played out. And as you said in the introduction, it dragged on for so many years, The Lady in the Lake, until it was finally kind of concluded. So I just thought there was a gap in the market for a book, really, to tell the whole story.
And it really is a story, isn't it, Lisa?
Exactly. I was going to say, for those who haven't yet read it, can you take us back? Just to give us a short summary, if you can, taking us back. So take us to that lake in 1997 and what happens first, because this is the beginning of the book, isn't it?
Yeah. So as you said, it's a case that spans 50 years, but really it came to public notice in the summer of 1997 when amateur divers were in Coniston Water, which is sort of one of the main lakes in Cumbria. And they used to go swimming, or quite a lot of divers go in Coniston Water just swimming and looking for things that might be lying on the lake bed, things that have maybe fallen off the back of boats. And quite often they'll find something like an old outboard motor that might have fallen off a boat. So on this particular day, they spotted it looked like a package that was on a ledge about 20 odd meters in from the shoreline of Coniston Water. They couldn't lift it on that particular day. It was too heavy. So they thought, we'll come back another day with some lifting gear, diving lifting gear, which they did. And they managed to bring it ashore, still thinking it was, some boat equipment. And they cut into this canvas bag, and some lead piping fell out of it when they did that. And as they opened it further, it very quickly became apparent that it was a human, it was a body, effectively. And they went and called the police, and very, very soon there were police at the shoreline, and a detective was called out, and he arrived, and they established the crime scene there. And very quickly as well, the media became involved. I was actually on holiday the week the body was found, but when I came back, I was assigned to cover the case. And one of my colleagues actually lived next door to one of the divers, and when the package was first found in the lake, the diver said to my colleague, "Oh, we found this package in Coniston Water." They didn't know what it was at that point, and he jokingly said, "It might be a body." You know, the sort of comment that you sort of say lightheartedly, but you don't actually mean. And my colleague, he was the news editor of the local paper. He said, "Well, you know, if it is a body, let us know." You know, and they both thought it wasn't that at all. But then obviously it was established that it was a body. So my colleague was the first reporter on the case, and then I was assigned the week after to go to cover it. You know,
you can't have had any idea at that point, can you, of how complex a case this would turn out to be? For you, was this just a routine job?
It was, yeah, because at that stage they didn't know how long the body had been in there. It was clear that it was murder, that, you know, it wasn't an accident. She hadn't just gone into the lake. They knew it was a woman pretty soon. The body was sort of dressed in a baby doll nightdress, it was described as, which was a kind of a nightdress that was popular in the 70s. So they knew it was a woman, but they didn't know who it was. I suppose the garment gave a hint at how long the body might have been in there. So yeah, at that point, we were just reporting the fact that the body had been found. The police were starting their investigations. Obviously, the attention, then you start thinking, well, who were the missing persons, the cold cases of the past? And people were making suggestions to the police. And also old newspaper accounts were suggesting that it was Carol Park, who was a 30-year-old teacher and mother of 3 from Barrow-in-Furness. And she'd gone missing in the summer of 1976. So that was 21 years prior to the body being found. But at that point, there were, you know, the police hadn't confirmed who the victim was. So my first task really was obviously to speak to the police and then act on that potential lead, and found out that Carol Park's brother, Ivor Price, was still living in the Barrow area. So one of the first things I did was go and find him and go and speak to him, and he obviously was, you know, getting requests from the media. As I say, they hadn't confirmed the body was Carol at that point, but he was speaking to the media. So yeah, at that point, we didn't really know what was going to happen. So I think later in the week, that same week, the police did establish that it was Carol Park. I think they were completely inundated with help from the public, and a lot of names were forward, but I think Carol Parks was the one that they were focusing on. And the detective who was the first one on the shoreline was a guy called Doug Marshall. He was a detective constable at the time. He'd only been in CID for a short time, and this was his first really big case. I think the senior officers thought this is an opportunity for Doug to you know, cut his teeth really in CID. So they put him in charge of setting up the incident room, things like that. And he told me when I interviewed him, he said that they went to Carol Park's dentist in Barrow to try and get the dental records to help identify the body if it was Carol. But obviously the dental records were from the 70s, so they weren't digitized. They were all the old, you know, card index, you know, filed away. And apparently it was on, they were kept in an old lockup, I think, in Barrow. And he and another colleague were sitting on the floor, the dusty floor of this lockup, going through these old dental records. And he said, you know, it's typical that the very last one that they looked at was Carol's dental records, and that was then used to help identify that she was the victim.
So you mentioned there about Ivor, who was Carol's brother, right? And you talk about, I mean, those of us who are journalists, I mean, as a magazine journalist, I've never had to do what you guys have to do, but you call it the death knock, don't you? When you go, and how did you mentally prepare for that situation?
Yeah, I suppose in '97 I'd been at the newspaper for about 5 years, so I'd done quite a lot of death knocks. I mean, it's quite a, I suppose to a non-journalist, it sounds a little bit callous, doesn't it? A death knock, but
Yeah.
it's kind of, it's one of those terms, isn't it? These days, I suppose it's easier to approach families because we have social media and a lot of information gets posted online. But back in '97, you literally had to go and knock on somebody's door to speak to a family, and grieving families, not just in murder cases, but in, if you're doing a story about a road accident, if somebody's died tragically, you've got to go and knock on the door. And I have to say, I can count on one hand the number of times I was turned away. And I probably did a dozen of these in my time at the Westmoreland Gazette. Most people actually were happy for me to go in and to speak to them, and I think often there's a sense that you can pay tribute to their loved one, and it's the opportunity for them to speak about their loved one. But as a journalist, it's not an easy thing to do. You never quite know how you're going to be greeted, if you are greeted. With Ivor Price, he was very dignified. He was very courteous, and he answered my questions. He couldn't say a lot really at that time because it hadn't been confirmed that the body was Carol's, but he had his suspicions, and I think he was in a position where he'd wondered for 21 years what had happened to her, and suddenly here was the potential for an answer, really, even if it meant knowing that Carol had died, had been murdered. I mean, it's a really tragic story about Ivor's family, actually, and I do talk about this in the book. Ivor had two sisters. Carol was his younger sister, but he had another sister called Christine, who incredibly had been murdered separately in a completely separate incident in 1969 by her boyfriend. So he had to contend with that, and then 7 years later, his other sister Carol went missing. Didn't know what had happened to her, and then in 1997 he discovered that she too had been murdered. So he was somebody who carried a lot of grief and trauma, I suppose. But he was, as I say, he was a very dignified man and very, he was a real family man. And I think he was very concerned about the impact that this new revelation had on his own children and his own mother, actually. Yeah.
So, no, go on.
I was just going to say, it certainly is a case of twists and turns, because what you've done exceptionally well throughout this book, Jeremy, is highlight the impact this case has at all of the different moments in time, with the extended family, with the, turmoil that the children have when they, we've not even discussed suspected, victim, and then turns out to, that whole, isn't it, the whole, I'm going to let you go into that detail in a moment, but as a reader or a listener, it is an extremely intriguing case, and it does unravel over such a long time. Do you think, had it have happened today, it would be any quicker? Is a question that came in.
Yeah. I suppose if the body had been found sooner, I suspect it would have been solved quicker, I guess. Maybe there would have been more DNA evidence. Maybe there would have been evidence at the potential crime scene that would have been preserved. Obviously by the time the body was found, the place where they believe Carol Parker had been murdered, you know, I know we're going to talk about it, but the suspected killer had long left that property, had been remarried a couple of times. This is her husband, Gordon Park. So it was very difficult to find a single smoking gun piece of information, you know, of evidence really to pin on their main suspect. And even the body had been in the water for 21 years. It was trussed up, you know, it was tied up with ropes and knots. And I guess a lot of the DNA evidence had been eroded effectively. So the evidence that would be gathered over the next few years would be circumstantial evidence. I mean, there was an incredible amount of circumstantial evidence, but nevertheless, that's what it was. So yeah, I suspect they might have had a better chance of solving it quicker had the body been found sooner.
Okay, well, go on, Lisa. Sorry, darling.
He was quite unlucky, wasn't he? Because where he put the body, if it had gone a little bit further, it was on the edge of what did you say? It was like an edge of a sort of
yeah. It was about, I think it was about 25 meters out from the shoreline, and then about another 20 meters downwards into the lake. So it was edging towards the center of the lake. But the divers did say that had the body been deposited a few meters further into the lake, it wouldn't have landed on that lip or that ledge, and it would have gone right down into the heart of the lake, and they say that it probably would never have been discovered. So, you know, from trying to commit the perfect murder, that was a bit of bad luck, you know, on Gordon Park's behalf.
It's Gordon is the husband, isn't
yes.
he? And it's been 21 years since his wife went missing. He's been married 3 times by now. Yeah. The kids are grown up. And then they get the ID, don't they? And then tell us, because this is quite a shocking part of the book, isn't it? When Gordon is notified, tell us what he did.
Yeah.
He does something very peculiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Gordon Park was Carol's husband in 1976. They met as teenagers in Barrow-in-Furness. He came from a family. His father had a painting and decorating business and owned a few shops in the Furness area of Cumbria. So there was a bit of money there, and both Gordon and Carol, they both trained to become teachers. So they were trying to sort of move on in their careers. Gordon built a bungalow for them both once they were married at a hamlet called Lease, which is near Barrow-in-Furness. But they had a very tempestuous, difficult marriage. Gordon was a very controlling character. He liked to control every aspect of his own life and that of Carol and his children as well. They had 3 children. One of the children, actually, they adopted the daughter of the first Price sister who was murdered. So, but they had 3 children, and they were constantly separating. Carol would leave Gordon because of the way he was with her. She actually went and lived with another man in the northeast, but could never really stand being away from her children. So she came back to be with Gordon Park, which ultimately, you know, led to her being murdered, which we can talk about that shortly. But so going back to 1997, Carol had been missing since 1976. The body is found in 97, and the police confirmed that it's Carol Park. And Gordon was on holiday in France with his 3rd wife. So, and he wasn't aware that the body had been discovered at this point. He got a phone call from his son, who's called Jeremy, actually, same name as me. So Jeremy Park rang Gordon, his father, in France and said, "Look, Dad, police have found this body. They think it's Mum." And Gordon Park's reaction to his son was, "Oh dear," which police afterwards said it just didn't seem a natural reaction. And if you were told that news, you know, your long missing wife has suddenly been discovered in Coniston Water, you would imagine you would probably bring your holiday to an end and rush back, not least just to be with your children, actually, to sort of comfort them and want to be with them. But it actually took him 4 days to return, and later he told police that, well, you know, we had this accommodation booked, we had our ferry booked, so we, you know, there was nothing that I could do, so I'll take my time coming back. So he arrived back in Barrow-in-Furness. This was August '97. By this time, the police had, you know, executed search warrants on his house in Barrow. They'd been in, they gained access through an upstairs window. They'd taken computer equipment. They took samples of rope from his garage, actually, rope with knots in them. Gordon Park was a keen sailor. He had a boat on Coniston Water in the 70s. He was also a keen mountaineer, so he was very proficient in tying, you know, knots. But his skill at knot tying was quite a way above the average sort of lay person's skill in tying knots. So yeah, so he arrived back. He was arrested the morning after he arrived back, and also there was a media circus around his house as well. You know, obviously with a story like this, you know, the name "The Lady in the Lake" was very quickly used in headlines, and there was a lot of interest, not just local media, but national and international media as well. So yeah, so he was arrested the morning after he got back to Barrow, and police were already suspicious because of his, you know, slow return.
I mean, go on, then.
I think we're going to say exactly the same, but then he does when does the whole going to talk to your solicitor before you go somewhere else come into all of this?
Right.
That's the bit that me and Lisa were talking about. That's very peculiar behaviour.
Yes. Do you mean when Carol first went missing?
Yes.
Yeah. So
that's weird.
Yeah.
So I'm going back a step. I know, but
Yeah.
it was weird from the beginning, wasn't it? It was odd behaviour from the very start.
Yeah. He seemed very, you know, police who interviewed him said he was very cold and quite arrogant. But back in 1976, Carol, well, what happened is she disappeared at the very start of the summer holidays in July 1976. As I say, she was a school teacher. He was as well. She disappeared on that first Saturday of the summer holidays. She and Gordon had planned to take the children to Blackpool for the day. And Gordon later claimed that on the morning of that Saturday that she was unwell and she didn't want to go with the children and him. So he took the children. When they returned from Blackpool, he said that she'd gone missing, but she'd left her wedding ring and engagement ring on the bedside table. But he didn't report her missing for 6 weeks. He would later maintain that she was always, you know, going off with other men. I mean, it came out at the trial that both he and Carol, you know, had extramarital affairs. But he claimed that he believed that she'd gone off with a man on this occasion, and it was right at the end of the summer holidays in '76 that he went to Ivor Price's house, so Carol's brother's house, and said Carol's disappeared, and Ivor said, when did she go missing? And Gordon said, 6 weeks ago. And Ivor was absolutely mortified, and he said, look, you've got to tell the police. But even then, he didn't contact the police directly. He spoke to his solicitor and got them to tell the police. So this was just another thing that rang alarm bells for the police in '76, actually. And he was visited by initially a police constable from Barrow who spoke to Gordon Park, and then he was also visited by detectives. But obviously they didn't find anything. There found no evidence of Carol. And there was nothing that they could do. They couldn't really proceed with that. Although I do believe that they did say to Gordon at the time, you know, if we find a body, you will be the chief suspect. And it kind of disappeared, really. There was very little media coverage of it in '76. There was I found a report in the Northwest Evening Mail, which was the daily paper in Barrow. I found a report from Christmas '76, and it was an appeal to the public, or an appeal to Carol actually, from Gordon and the three children. You know, please come home for Christmas. You know, the children are missing you. And it was a really heart-wrenching photograph actually of the three children standing next to the Christmas tree with presents underneath it. You know, saying, "Please come home,
And
Mum."
that was a posed picture, right? That they'd had that photo done, so he knew that those children were standing there asking for their mum to come home when he knew what had happened.
And he was telling everyone he didn't know where Carol was, and I suppose this is where you've got to think. These are the days before the internet, before CCTV cameras on our streets. It was very easy for somebody to go missing. You know, and, you know, we often watch things, don't we? We're like Crime Watch, people for missing people, and often it was from the '70s and '80s, in the days when it was so easy to go off grid, really, I suppose. And I suppose, you know, for Gordon Park, you know, ultimately we know what happened and we know what he did, but he knew that nothing could be pinned on him, really. So, you know, it was quite a cynical thing for him to do, I think, to use his children in that way, and, you know, as you say, pose them for the local newspaper photographer and then do an appeal like that. And that was really the last time I think it was in the media until 1997,
when the body was found. So can I interject, Jeremy, because I do want people to read this book that haven't, and obviously there's a lot to this case and there's a lots of twists and turns, and you write it incredibly well in terms of you've really approached it with a fiction narrative as a reader. You know, there's a lot of facts, there's a lot to consume in here, and actually it's very refreshing for Lisa, I'm not sure you agree, for Jeremy to whistle stop us back through the book. I'm really enjoying listening to you because it was a lot. There was a lot to take in. You're like, hang on about, now we're here, now we're there. But one of the questions that came in was specifically about the media, and it come in quite a lot. Being a journalist, how did the media shape public perception of the Lady in the Lake case at these different moments in time? And do you think the portrayal of the case by the press affected the investigation or its resolution?
That's a really good question, isn't it? I think even since 1997, the way we cover the cases relating to women who are murdered, you know, and violence against women, I think there's much more now a focus on trying not to glorify the killer, or even, you know, any kind of sympathy towards the killer, but much more about restoring victims to their rightful place as real people. It was something I tried to do with my first book as well, I think. You know, and I think the way true crime and crime has been covered, certainly in the past, it's very much focused on the sensational aspect of murders, particularly murders of women. So I think, you know, often names like, you know, even the name The Lady in the Lake, actually, you know, it's unavoidable, and it was unavoidable really for me using it as the name for the book, because that's what the case has become known for. But I do know that you know, Carol's family, her children, you know, really dislike the name The Lady in the Lake. I mean, it's really unfortunate that is how it's recorded and that's how it's remembered. But I think there's probably a more sympathy towards the victim these days, you know, than there was in the past.
Quite rightly so. So Sorry, I've just had a question come and I'll
Yeah,
read it
yeah.
from Gemsy89. What I didn't get when I read the book was how the evidence from the woman who says she saw a man matching Gordon's description like 20 years earlier, and that was allowed as evidence.
Was that? I'm trying to think. Was that the evidence at the trial from? There was a young couple who were they were engaged in 1976. They were on holiday in the Lake District, and they'd gone down to spend some time on the edge of Coniston Water. They were sitting in the car reading newspapers, and they had a pair of binoculars, and they were looking out across the lake, and they saw a boat and a man standing on the boat, and it was a man who they later described as looking like Gordon Park. And this man had what they initially thought were breathing tanks. It was a package, and they thought, as I say, it was a diving breathing tank. But then he pushed this package over the side of the boat, and the young woman said to her fiance, "I hope that's not his wife." Again, another light-hearted comment, the sort of things you do say in these situations when you don't know what it is. Now, there's no way really of saying absolutely that was Gordon Park that they saw, and it took 20 years for that couple to come forward and give evidence to the police. And it was only really after the sort of intense media coverage of the case that kind of prompted that memory. And I think they really only remembered it because they just got engaged at the time. So that was one piece of circumstantial evidence that was put forward by the prosecution. Again, you can see how probably at the trial the Gordon Park's defence would probably pick that apart and say, well, that doesn't prove it was Gordon Park. They could be mistaken. It could have been a different day, But as I said earlier, it was kind of the overwhelming weight of circumstantial evidence that kind of convinced the jury at his trial.
Do you think because Gordon was found guilty, but there are many people, including his own children, that believed that he was innocent, that this was a miscarriage of justice? And going to what this person here is saying, there was no DNA evidence linking him. That's right, wasn't it? And it was all that, but it was this weight of circumstantial evidence. Do you think, though, if it were to be tried now, that evidence, this potentially unreliable eyewitness, and then the knots, and it comes down to a piece of rock that might have come from the bungalow, would that be enough now to have gotten him convicted, would you think?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it was only 2020 when Gordon Park's son and his widow, third wife, it was only 2020 when they finally got an appeal here to get the Court of Appeal to look at the conviction, and the appeal judges did rule, and they said that this was a safe conviction. So that's only 4 years ago. So so they felt that there was nothing there to undermine that conviction, even though Gordon Park maintained his innocence, right through the police investigation, right through the trial, and even afterwards when he was in prison. And two of his children stood by him. The daughter, who was the adopted daughter, she actually gave evidence against him at the trial. But they were convinced that he was innocent, that the evidence wasn't compelling enough. But the jury obviously felt it was. So yeah, it's hard to say, isn't it, really?
Because modern juries seem to like DNA evidence, don't they? So you would wonder if a modern jury might say without any DNA. But then, of course, how's it going to be DNA when it's been the body's been underwater for 20 years? Yeah. But what really struck me about this book was Gordon, and the way that you write it. Gordon's almost like two completely different people. He's like this icy disciplinarian who won't let the kids talk at the table. But then there are other people, his children and students, who say he's a kind, gentle man. did you ever get to the bottom of how there was such a big dichotomy between the sort of the two sides of Gordon Park? Was he a psychopath? Was he acting nice, or could he compartmentalize? Did you ever get a sense of what was going on with him?
I suspect, because I only ever saw him once in person, and that was at the inquest. But on that occasion, he was under huge public scrutiny. You know, he was giving evidence at the inquest, and there were, you know, dozens of journalists from all over the world there. So he had the world's media watching him. So it wasn't a good occasion to judge what the man was like. And you're right, there are a lot of people who spoke out in favour of Gordon Park and said he was a loving father, and his children spoke about that. Although they said that he was strict. But his nieces, Ivor Price's daughter, said that he was very strict and a real disciplinarian. But having spoken to the detectives who interviewed him, and also other police that I know who encountered him, said he was a very arrogant man who liked, you know, had a very high opinion of himself, and almost couldn't understand why he was being accused of this murder. And it was, you know, how dare the police sort of bring these charges against him. And even in police interview, he taunted the police, you know, saying, you know, you've got to prove it. I can't believe you're asking me these questions. And he was quite derogatory about Carol as well. You know, she was the one at fault. She was the one who kept going off with men and abandoning the children. Although he did speak warmly about her and affectionately about her when he was at the trial, when he was describing the early years of their relationship. He did speak quite warmly about her. But you're right, there were people that he taught at the school in near Barrow that he taught at. A lot of students came forward and said, you know, what a nice teacher he was, and he was very well respected. He was a church goer, you know, and he used to do I think he used to do decoration. He used to do DIY jobs at the local church, things like that. So he was I think he was seen as being a pillar of the community, really.
It's quite a case, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Lisa, have you got questions there from your readers, or do you want me to read some of these that have come in?
If you've got some, go for it. I've got a few more, but go get
Impact of the case. I've got some questions around. So, in your opinion, Jeremy, how did the Lady in the Lake case influence public perception of crime and justice in that era?
That's a good question. Let me give that some thought. In terms of the impact, I think first of all it tore apart the Park and Price family, because they were divided on their views about Gordon Park's guilt, you know, and Ivor Price very much felt that Gordon had committed the murder, and it meant that Ivor Price's children didn't really see much of their cousins because of this rift that it created. I think the public perception was that Gordon Park was guilty. I mean, he was charged with the murder in 97, and he made a couple of preliminary appearances at Magistrates Court, but in 1998, early 98, the police dropped the charges because the Crown Prosecution Service felt there wasn't enough evidence at that point. And immediately after that, Gordon Park kind of went on a PR offensive, and he gave a big, in-depth interview to a Sunday newspaper, and he was paid 50 grand actually to do that interview. And it was very much, you know, poor me, I've lived a nightmare while the police have, you know, accused me of this. You know, my reputation is in tatters, and I just want to be left alone now. But I genuinely don't think that the public were convinced by that at all. I think, other than people who were close to Gordon Park in Barrow, who did sort of defend him, I think most people suspected him. You know, because who else would it have been, really? All the circumstantial evidence pointed to Gordon Park. You know, he had a boat on Coniston Water. He sold the boat the month after Carol went missing. He claimed at the trial that he'd sold the boat in June 1976, and he claimed that Carol went missing in July 1976. But the prosecution, they actually produced the logbook and confronted him when he was on the witness stand and said, actually, you sold this the month after July 1976. So he had to kind of backtrack on that, and he was quite ruffled by that in court. So I think public opinion was against him generally.
Guys, it's 10 to 9 for those of you watching live. This is your book club, so please pen your questions and I will deliver them once they come in the comments. Over to you, Lisa, in the meantime.
So, I don't want to spoiler it for those who haven't read it, but it is a true story. So Gordon Park, where Gordon Park eventually ends up and what happens to Gordon, did you expect his journey to end that way? I mean, let's just say he's put in prison, isn't he? And then he takes his own life while he's there.
Yeah.
Did you expect that to be the end of Gordon's journey?
Do you mean in terms of the case and
just the fact that he took his own life? That feels like, if he's this sort of narcissistic person in a way, it sort of felt. I was very shocked when I read that. I was like, I didn't expect that to be the end, because it wasn't the end for his family. They kept fighting to clear his name, didn't they? But I felt quite shocked. You've got this guy who's presented as this icy sort of, narcissistic. People say he's arrogant, and to kind of end that way didn't feel like something that he would do.
No, he was convicted in 2005 and was jailed for life to serve a minimum of 15 years. His family said that he was a man that was used to living out in the open, in the outdoors. He was a keen climber, sailor. He loved the Lake District, and suddenly he found himself in a tiny cell in prison, a world that he wasn't used to, and his family said that he ultimately just gave up hope, because he was getting nowhere with the appeal process, because you don't automatically get an appeal. You have to you effectively apply to get permission to make an appeal. So it's quite a long, convoluted process, and every attempt kept being knocked back. There was a campaign set up called Free Gordon. There were a couple of writers who wrote books sort of in favour of Gordon, and trying to show that he was innocent, that it was a flawed conviction, but none of it was successful. And then, so 5 years after being jailed, he took his own life. He actually died on his 66th birthday. And his family said that it was because he gave up hope. But other people, and perhaps the police, might have taken the view that, was it the act of somebody who was guilty, he just couldn't admit his guilt, and it was just, it was the coward's way out. Of course, we'll never know, really. I'd left the Westmoreland Gazette at the turn of the century, actually. So my involvement was very much at the start of the police investigation, and I covered the inquest. But I moved on and worked for lots of other newspapers. But I'd always kept a sort of a keen eye on developments with it, and spoke to my colleagues who were still at the paper, who sort of continued to report on it. So yeah, I was quite shocked when he took his own life. But as you say, the process of trying to appeal the conviction went on for another 10 years, really. He died, you know, incredible. And the detective, Doug Marshall, who'd been there right at the start, was still there at the very end, even though he'd climbed the ladder within Cumbria Police, and he progressed to other roles as well. He wanted to be the kind of the constant presence really for Cumbria Police through the whole case. And I think he was very much driven by trying to win justice for Carol's family, actually. So he attended all the trial, he attended the appeal hearings, and he was there in 2020 when the appeal verdict was delivered as well. So I think he deserves a lot of credit, really, for seeing the case through. He kept the case going, actually, when it looked like, you know, Gordon Park wasn't going to be prosecuted. He sort of did a lot of work behind the scenes. He used to carry the Carol Park file with him everywhere, and he would just try and chip away at it all the time. And then he convinced his superior officers to, you know, I think it's time we revisit this and rearrest Gordon Park. So yeah, so Doug Marshall's, you know, somebody who deserves a lot of credit, I think.
I never gave up. I've got a question for you, Jeremy, if I may. Do you think you've got, obviously you followed this case, you know, from a young lad, and it went on and on and on. If you could ask one person involved in the Lady in the Lake case a question, who would it be? What unanswered questions have you got? Who would it be, and what would you ask?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and probably if I had a long time to think about it, I'd probably come up with lots of different answers. But I think one of the unanswered questions, actually, the one that the police have never really been able to establish, is where was Carol murdered? They believe it happened in the bungalow that Gordon and Carol lived in, but there was no evidence. They couldn't find any evidence. But how did Gordon Park do it? If he'd taken the children to Blackpool on that day and then returned and Carol had gone missing, when did he have the opportunity to do it? And he must have done it when the children were in the house. How did he sort of clear up afterwards? The police believe that the post-mortem revealed that she died after being struck in the face with, they think, an axe of some sort, maybe an ice axe, and she sort of suffered devastating injuries to the face. But how did he sort of deal with it afterwards? You know, and that the police believe that he put her body in a chest freezer in the garage. So that's one area I think that's unanswered, and I'm not sure we'll ever really get to the bottom of that. You know.
I just want to circle back to a comment that one of our visitors at CrimeCon, Anne, hi Anne, nice to see you joining. She said, Jeremy, I still have the pamphlet that was posted through the local doors called Villain or Victim. Did you see that? It would have been around the mid-20s, maintaining Gordon's innocence. Do you recall that?
No, I never saw that. I suppose around about that time I was living, well, I live in Cheshire now, and I would have been living in Cheshire then. So, and I didn't see that. I saw the Free Gordon campaign website that the family did, and I guess those pamphlets maybe were from that, I suspect. But yeah, I'd be interested to see that pamphlet. Definitely.
And stick it in your bag if you still have it, and bring it to CrimeCon. You can pass it to Jeremy in the bar. Has anyone else got any other questions to ask Jeremy whilst we have him for another few minutes? Lisa, I know you had a couple that you still want to ask.
Well, just what's next? This is a great book.
Yeah.
So are you going to do another one? Have you got another story that's burning to be told?
Well, it's interesting. Funnily enough, I am working on something at the moment. I've got lots of different ideas, and I'm really glad that you sort of pick up on the sort of way I write it. The sort of try to write them like thrillers, like fiction. Yeah. Use the techniques of fiction, but everything obviously is true and researched. So I'm glad that you pick up on that. This one, I found it was quite challenging writing this one, because originally it was just going to be a straight revisit of the case. But my agent said to me, she said, well, you reported on this, you should be in this book. So it needs to be partly a memoir, which is what it is. But I did find it was quite challenging writing about myself, actually. And I guess, Lisa, you will know this, as a reporter, you're very used to writing with that detachment. Suddenly, when you have to write about yourself, it's quite difficult. How much do you expose of yourself? So for the next book, I'm sort of thinking more of a historical crime. I haven't exactly pinned it down yet, but I think I might find it a little bit less stressful write about something that's historical for the next one. So I've got one or two irons in the fire at the moment that I'm exploring.
Well, we look forward to seeing it. Watch this space. I'm just going to ask you a quick question from Gemsy89. Has this been Jeremy's most interesting case? If not, which one?
Okay, do you mean in terms of reporting?
I'm presuming, quickly let me know, but let's go with reporting.
Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly, it's the most significant crime story that I've worked on, and I've worked on a few, and I think I talk about one other one that's in the book, and there was a double murder in the sort of Lancaster and Morecambe area that I covered. It became known actually as the Spider-Man of Ely, I think, in Cambridgeshire. The killer, Terry Clifton, was from that area, but when police went to arrest this suspect, Terry Clifton, he was in his girlfriend's flat, and he was about 10 floors up, and he actually scaled down the side of the building to escape being arrested by police. So that was quite a big case. But yeah, the Lady in the Lake's the most most significant case that I reported on.
And James has just said yes, reporting. So hopefully that answered your question. Anne Muir gave you a comment. Jeremy, I'm bringing it to Barrow Library in January. So there you go. You'll get to see that leaflet.
I would say bring the pamphlet, Anne. And
she'll bring it. She'll bring it. Well, Jeremy, it's been an absolute pleasure listening to you, in your own words, give us a deep dive into this case. For those of you that haven't read or listened to the book, I would definitely say it should be on your Christmas stocking list, because it was a really insightful, intriguing, in-depth case. I've heard about the case. I understood the case. I knew the outcome of the case. What I hadn't really fathomed or comprehended, I think, is how long this went on for, and how many twists and turns that were involved in this case. And I think that struck both of us, didn't it, Lisa?
Yeah, really, it really did. And it sounds awful when I say an easy read, but you know what I mean by that. Like, it was, you could really kind of race through it, because it's very compelling. Everything about it is very compelling.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I try to leave the boring bits out.
Well, you did it. You did good.
Thank you very much.
You did good. Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. We will see you very, very soon. Thank you very much. Me and Lisa will now let everyone know what we're reading next. Thank you, Jeremy. Lots of love. Everyone's saying fascinating talk. Thank you. I'll be buying the book. Brilliant to watch this. Really interesting. I'm going to look out for that. Sounds interesting. Very interesting discussion. So thumbs up all round, Jeremy. So everyone's off to buy their book. All right. See you later. Thank you. Thank you very much. So Lisa. So that was fantastic.
Really interesting book.
Hang on,
next one.
Still with us, Jeremy. You're welcome to stay.
I'll log out now then. Thank you very much.
I'll share it. I'll see you later.
It's actually quite hard to leave, isn't it?
It is hard to leave. It is hard to leave. Well, listen, that was a really, really interesting session. That was a lot of information for one man to share off the cuff, and I did give him some tough questions there. So that was an interesting book. But let's move on to next month's book. So we are going to get together the 2nd the second Tuesday in January, like we do, aren't we,
It's probably
Lisa?
around 12th or something like that, isn't it?
Yes, whenever that falls. And we're going to be reading, not listening,
Are you
reading.
having to read it?
I'm already halfway through.
Are you? Oh,
Yeah.
God, well done.
Yes. Well, yeah, I had a very unusual train journey the other day that I basically read it standing in a toilet cubicle up against a 5-hour delayed train. But I started reading it along with the man next to me on my right and the lady next to me on the
Oh,
left.
my
So we all were reading
God.
it.
Did you have to wait for them so you could turn the pages?
I had to hurry up, but I did manage to sell a ticket for CrimeCon, so that was funny. But to join our community. But this is Chris Clark, Antonita Matthews, and it's the murder of Judith Roberts. It is looking into the depths of Peter Sutcliffe, and we are going to be reading that and reviewing it in January. So it's going to be an interesting read. So I won't spoil it because I'm halfway through, but I encourage everyone to read it, and then we can review it with both Chris Clark and Tanita Matthews in the new year. And that's us wrapped up for 2025. It's 2024. Oh my goodness, 2024.
Yeah, 2024, babes.
It's been a whirlwind of live events. It has been a whirlwind of all sorts, hasn't it? Magazine issues, book clubs,
Yeah.
CrimeCon in Glasgow, CrimeCon in Manchester, the True Crime Awards. We have had a lot of things going on, and it's all thanks to everyone that's involved in the community. So I'm ever grateful. Next year, some changes are happening with CrimeCon. We are launching in Manchester, hence our book choice for tonight. We're launching in Manchester, and that will take place in September on the 27th, and London will take place in June. So for those of you that haven't yet booked your tickets to join us, I encourage you to do so, and you can use code Book Club at checkout for your discount. And that's it, really. We're going to get back together, aren't we, Lisa, in the new year, and we will continue. But for now, everyone can go and have a Christmas break. Just starting over on True Crime now is our favourite. It's Dr. Dick Shepherd, Dr. Richard Shepherd. So get over there and watch that. I know, he's a big CrimeCon favourite. So that's on now at 9 over on True Crime. And then after that, Cults was so in. Did you see any of the Cult session at CrimeCon?
Don't think I did, actually.
So Betsy Cameron did an incredible session.
Oh,
Casey from Cult Vault did a fantastic session as well. Not about cults, about coercive control, but she stepped in and did a session for us with her great podcast, Cult Vault. I'm digressing. The reason I'm talking about cults is at 10 o'clock tonight, there's a programme on True Crime all about cults. So I'm going to be checking that out. So Shelley saying she loved the cult session. It was really good. Betsy was really, really strong. So I could talk to you all night long, guys, but we need to wrap up now. So happy New Year, happy Christmas, all that jazz. If you don't celebrate those traditions, just have a nice time.
Yeah.
And we will catch you up in the new year, right? Lots of love. Thank you, Lisa, for everything you do. I appreciate you. See you later, guys. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye.
If you're fascinated by true crime, then join us in June 2025 for CrimeCon London. Meet the biggest names in true crime TV, experience live forensic demonstrations, and dive deep into the criminal mind with your favourite authors, podcasters, and content creators. To secure your place, go to crimecon.co.uk now and be part of the UK's biggest true crime community. CrimeCon London, partnered by True Crime, 7th and 8th of June 2025.